demographics update.
Yeah, I wanted to recognize Steve Anderson for his work in coordinating with our demographers, Applied Economics. A couple of their staff are here this evening. We'll turn it over to them to provide a summary of their findings over the course of this revision to our demographic study. So, Rick Bramer with Applied Economics, and I'll let you introduce your guest.
And Dan Whitney with Land Marketing. Does an awful lot of work in the Kansas City area and has at least half of my brain in this case, if not maybe 2/3. But anyway, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Tucker, it's our pleasure to be here tonight to bring you up to speed on the demographic update that we've been doing, working with the district on and off actually over a period of about 7 or 8 years. And most recent complete study was during the 2010-11 school year. And the projections, at least in that report, for 14-15 were only off by about 80 students after the 4-year period. So we're pretty happy with that, and we'll hope for some things like that to continue in the future. But part of that accuracy is that I am a demographer. I've been doing this work for about here in Kansas City. I have the pleasure of working with Dan Whitney with Land Marketing, who brings the local knowledge of the local real estate market and housing and things like that. But you have to be here really to kind of understand how all that plays out. You kind of have, in my opinion, kind of the best of both worlds because we're both experts in what we do. So I understand you have this presentation in front of me, in front of you, sorry. It's not in front of me, which makes it a little hard, I gotta say, but we're all gonna roll with it here. So can I get to the next slide or the rest of it? Just real briefly, our scope of work is pretty much unchanged. I mean, we do evaluation of enrollment trends in terms of the grade level and also the geographic distribution of the students within the district, because we don't look just at district numbers, we look at neighborhoods within the district. And different neighborhoods are going different directions at different times. And those are driven by the demographic characteristics of the population. We have things happening right now with birth rates that were way down during the recession, which have been catching up with us now in kindergarten, first and second grade. We're seeing some of those trends roll through. We're also, and Dan's going to talk about a little bit, different buyer profile right now in the housing that's being sold, which is also having a big impact on our enrollment numbers. And then residential development, I mean, you guys have been, actually during the recession, during the heart of the recession, you were my fastest growing district that I worked for nationwide. You guys barely even skipped a beat when everyone else's pants went down. So it's a great thing that you guys have been able to maintain that. And actually, it's slowed here recently, and Dan may again be able to enlighten us on why that's been happening. And then the last part is we do 2 sets of enrollment projections. One is a district level macroeconomic. How does Liberty School District fit into Metro Kansas City? What part of the economy? How do you play? That kind of thing. And we also do what I call a sub-district. It's microeconomic. It's basically a quarter sections style geography. It matches up fairly well with your attendance areas. And the idea there is to capture what's happening in the neighborhoods. Because like I said, you can have one neighborhood that's in decline and one neighborhood that's advancing all at the same time, which gives you a net zero at the district level, but it may have a big impact on campus-to-campus numbers. So if we can go ahead. We start with the easy stuff. This is just district enrollment, total district enrollment from the September enrollment reports going clear back to 1991-92. The blue bars obviously being the number of kiddos in each of those years, and the red line, the squiggly red line, being the annual year-over-year % change. And so, I mean, incredible, I mean, increases like we've talked about that you've had to live with and manage. Since 2000, you know, an overall 75% or so increase in total enrollment. But you can see that red line has been on its way down ever since the start of the recession, although, like I said, it held up in the 3 to 4% range much, much, much longer than many districts that I work for. You can see we've been trailing off, and you know what I like to think about is I hope bottoming out here in the last couple of years, and again we'll look at more why that is. And one of the first reasons why that is, and this chart is actually probably one of my favorites in the entire report, because this breaks down the enrollment. It's still total, it's district numbers. but it breaks it down into what we call enrollment cohorts. So in this case, the lines are the number of K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12 students. And what you can see is that we've had this during the housing boom in particular. A lot of new families came in, a lot of younger people, big increases in the K2 group, which are now articulating their way through the 3-5 group. But what's happened in the last 3 years, as you can see, we've actually had net decline in the K2 group. And that's between 2007 and 2011, the birth rates in the United States and in Missouri fell by over 20% to the lowest levels on record. So if you add 5 years to that to get kids into kindergarten, right? So you're talking about 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. But we're not looking, everything else equal, we're not looking for big increases on that low end. And so that is going to ventriculate, through the upper grades as we go forward through time. So right now we've seen the 6-8 group and the 9-12 group continue to chug along and increase because they're still living on the growth of the past. And that's going to continue to put pressure on those upper levels where I know that we're getting tight on space. And we'll come back to kind of what that means on the next one. This one will take a second. This is just the fact that not only do we look at just district numbers, we look at individual students. So we get one record per student, no names or anything like that, but we actually know where every kiddo lives. So these dots on the map show you that distribution. And that allows us to tie the students that are coming out of an area directly to the type and the age of housing that's in that particular area. And then these numbered areas you see overlaid on the top, we actually use as our level of geography when we're doing these projections, these sub-district projections I'm talking about. So we're doing projections for, in this case, 70-odd different areas. And these will go equally fast. These are good mental pictures. This is the enrollment density in the district, so everybody kind of has this idea, I think, in the back of their head that kids are kind of evenly distributed across the district. And you all know, but people need to understand, especially when you're facing facility issues and so on, that it's not the case at all. You got high density in the middle of the district, out to the west, and very low density elsewhere. And then the cool thing about it is, since we've been doing this long enough, I've got now 5 years worth of change I can look at that come out of each one of these boxes. And so now the coloring of these individual cells is by the change in enrollment over the last 5 years. And so you see, and again, don't really have to tell you what's happened, but this really quantifies it, really paints the picture of kind of the distribution of change that you've been dealing with, which includes also areas in blue, which are here, blue and green, are areas of decline. So in the last 5 years, you're actually getting, in those areas, you're getting less kids. So it's not all just that everybody's increasing. Lots of numbers, and I'm only going to talk about a few of them, but you've got a demographic shift going on underneath all of this. We talked about it a little bit, but during the growth between 2000 and 2010, you can see that the population in the school age groups, and I include under 5 in that definition, but they grew at or above the overall rate of growth. So the rate of growth in student population kept pace with the population. And so in the last 5 years, 4 years, not only has the rate gone down from an average of 4.4% per year to 1.6% per year, the kiddo groups, except for the high school group, have underperformed. So we're getting less kids out of the population that we do have. And we saw that. We saw that in the other chart, basically. But what it's driven by is very interesting at the bottom of the page, which is the age of the householders. And that's really the secret, is to, if the kids in the report, if you get really tired some night and you want to read it, there's a fabulous section in here on why this matters. But in the 25 to 34 group, the 35 to 44 group are your elementary parents. And then the 35 to 44 is an overlap with the 44 to 54s, 45 to 54s, which are your high school parents. And you can see in the percentage change again, how those cohorts really grew during the first 10 years and really haven't kept pace. So it's all saying the same basic thing, but it reinforces it, and it's an important part of what we use in our projections. And another important part is going to be the housing, which is currently taking place. I think Dan's going to talk to us.
Thank you, Rick. I was really enjoying being the teller part of the Penn and Teller. Well, housing does absolutely have an important impact, not only the volume of housing that has or hasn't occurred over the last 4 or 5 years, but the price point of home that is out there and available, and the kind of buyer that can buy that entry-level starting a family. So that really does have an impact on how many young students are entering the system based on the age of their parents and the house they can afford. So in this next chart, you see in the blue line how the total volume has fluctuated a little bit, but it is really leveling off there over the last 5 years, 6 years almost. There are a couple of things that are impacting this. We've had very, very little development. I work with a lot of banks that finance loans, and banks just don't want to do this right now. So starting about 3 years ago, we were already behind the 8 ball in terms of providing new lots on the ground for future development. So this will, regardless of price point, it will continue to drag down the numbers more than it would otherwise, just a lack of supply. So when a developer comes in and wants to develop, they typically will look at a higher priced product. Local regulations, federal regulations, just the cost of development drives that up. So it continues the cycle of higher price point homes. And that next slide illustrates that a little bit clearer. This is something we update every 4 months. The slide on the left that shows the homes under construction and the total production, so specs, models, and so forth. When we look at this chart 10 years ago, even accounting for inflation, we had probably 50% more product on the lower end of that scale than we have now. So across the metro area and up here, we have quite a few developments that were approved for smaller lots, sometimes attached product that has set there. And that's why on the chart to the right, we have some pretty high dark red bars that show all those lots that were approved for a lower price point. So we've already seen in Liberty townhome developments being converted to single family. And I think we'll see that some more. And that might help on some of the lower end product. So the residential development can happen. I know there's some untapped areas of Liberty where this growth could occur. And over on the east side and southeast side is one of those kinds of locations. In talking with developers over the years, many who have tried to buy property and develop property there, rock is the biggest impediment. So again, look, that is something that's going to drive those prices up. It's not going to help the numbers of the young students. So there are some physical things on the ground that impact the student population as we go forward.
And this map here is showing stuff that's not only active, which is kind of where we focus, obviously, most of our effort, but things that can come online in the next 5 to 10 years. And if you go to the next slide, it just takes that data basically and puts numbers behind it. And there's only a couple that you need to understand. One is that just in the colored areas that you saw on the map, which does not include all the potential developable land in the district, that's still 30,000 units worth of potential housing units. And the fact that we're only building 200 a year right now makes this 100 years worth of supply. So there's ample land. It's just that the product isn't able to leverage the land that is out there per se. And one of the big indicators, you see in active projects, there's only 2,600 units, 2,700 units left to be built total in active projects. That's down about 1,300, so almost 4,000 units 4 years ago. So like Dan was saying, no one's putting anything new in the pipeline. We're building out what was there, but nobody's putting in much new. And in fact, we haven't seen any multifamily new except for now. all of a sudden you see off of 152, there's a couple of projects that are coming up, you know, in town here. They're finally going to put some multifamily back into the mix, but boy, that's been completely absent, you know, in the last few years. And it really does limit the housing opportunities for everyone. So there's plenty of supply. Go ahead.
Well, that phenomenon isn't unusual to Liberty or unique to Liberty. At the height of the market, we had about 33,000 developed lots in the metro area, and now we're down below 20,000. So, and we've gotten rid of all the good ones. So it's the stuff that's left over and that's why we're behind the eight ball.
And the other thing you'll see is that they all fall in the lower density, you know, basically under 3.5 units per acre. So bigger houses, more expensive houses, as opposed to the stuff that's planned in the future where you see a lot more higher density, which we've been talking about. And if that higher density units begin to come online, that's where it goes, especially the little ones. And that's what we're going to be watching very closely. So, you know, we just kind of skipping forward, lots of numbers, but one of the things I like about having the numbers is you can see that K-5 group only grew by 3 students last year. The entire elementary group was only up by 3 students from 5723 to 5726. And so the fact that there was 199 new students last year was all driven by secondary, basically, middle school and secondary enrollment. And in fact, we're showing the K-5 group continuing to climb for 2 more years, after which point we'll get through this birth rate anomaly, and hopefully we're going to be bringing some different kind of product online. But if you do projections, that's the gamble that you're taking, is looking at the market, looking at the other factors, and seeing where it's going to go. But the other groups, the 6-8 and the 9-12 group, continue to have decent growth the next few years, even though the K-5 group is basically stagnant. We're looking for about the same increase this year. We're hoping 207 as opposed to 199. Things really haven't changed much. This looks like last year played all over it for the most part. So, in addition to doing the district level projections, we do projections for each one of these boxes. And here I'm just showing you the boxes colored by the elementary attendance area that they serve, just as an example. But we can also have done, even for Liberty in the past, what-if analysis. So if this grid goes to this school, to that school, and not only do we have the current data for these boxes, but now we have 7 or 8 years worth of your historical data about how many kids came out of each one of these boxes. So it's a really powerful tool for us to use in planning. And from that, and again, I'm not going to rattle through all these numbers, that's not my intent. I just wanted to make sure that when you're reading this, you understand what you're seeing. Because this shows the enrollment levels by attendance area. Now that's different than by school, so don't tell me your school numbers are different than everybody. This is actually by exactly where kids live. And the cool thing is now we can go back to 2010 and see 5 years worth of history. So everything that's on this chart in green, that's not numbers I made up. That's regurgitating basically your data back to you. And it's really interesting because you can see some of the attendance areas are in decline. Some of them have increased dramatically. Some of them are relatively flat. And that's, again, you know, part of what we look at in doing the projections is where you're coming from, where you're going. And then the projected periods, the 2015-16, what we're hoping for this year, and then the 5-year projection for 1920, and then the 10-year projection for 24-25, and the changes and so forth that go with it. So if you look out in the change end, you know, and you're looking at the elementary part, in the next 5 years, only 240 students, K-5, over. But you follow it up with 443 middle schoolers and at least 700 more high schoolers. So you can see that shift, and then 5 years after that, it kind of flips back. But I want to separate this and understand that this is attendance area versus the next one, which doesn't have as much of the history showing, but this is then calculating the difference between how many kids live in an area and how many kids go to that school. And it's carrying that difference forward over time, so that we have projections that are more or less by school. Now, given the fact that kids can change and programs can move, because the reason why there's a difference is usually special ed programs, you guys know, have a magnet program. for instance. And so Epic is pulling 300 kids out of other attendance areas into that school. So granted, there's going to be a difference between these and schools. But like I said, I don't really want to dwell on the individual numbers as much as just, I want you to understand what you're looking at when you see this in my report, and how to interpret it. And hopefully how staff can put it to work, because it's really important to us that somebody is able to make use out of this information, that there's really value to it. And I really think there is. So we know that the housing of the 2000s brought in younger families. We've got a lot of young kids that are now growing up. We've got a gap coming in that department, but if the housing market responds to what people want, what we think they can afford, one of the things, of course, Dan just didn't happen to touch on it, but so many people did short sales and foreclosures and so on and so forth 7 years ago. Guess how long it takes to get rid of a bankruptcy? 7 years. So we're really hoping that we get that lower end back into the market and that there's something for them to buy. But I think that's where the next push is going to be. And Liberty's always been a great family community. If you got anything going for you, it's that you're a great family community.
Rick, adding to that is, the group that was most heavily impacted by the economic downturn were those young families. So them getting their financial lives in order has taken a lot longer. So a lot of builders have said, well, this market isn't even there yet. And we've also heard the argument that the millennials are forever scarred against owning single-family homes. It is true that they're taking longer to get there, as they're taking longer to get to a lot of life milestones, including how to talk to the opposite sex. But
Yeah.
once they have kids, that changes.
Yeah.
So, and they will. They will start to have kids eventually. And they will start with the resale product, and then you'll see a matriculation up the housing scale. But if the new product isn't there, it just slows it down.
So we're looking for enrollment growth after this year to slowly accelerate. I think we're going to have a little bit of a boom-ish, but I'm talking up to like 3%, not 8%, like we used to have, but back up to around 3%, and stabilizing, back in that 2 to 2.5% range. I think we've got enough energy in the market, enough jobs being created locally, and enough potential product for that to happen. And if that happens, looking at where we're at now, that's going to basically boil down into the need for 1, maybe 2 elementary schools over the next 10 years. 1 for sure. Second one will depend on how much of what we're talking about actually happens. But the middle school and the high school are going to be on the hurt list, kind of no matter what. So you've got, things in front of you, which is good. It's better to be doing this than closing schools, because I spent most of the last 5 years closing schools across the country. So this is a better problem to have, and it's just different because the demographics have changed. Home buyers have changed. That's my story. We would be more than happy to take any questions.
I've got a couple. One is really just another comment, and that is to say thank you. It has been, this is one of the things I really brag on a lot when you're out talking to the public and talking to people, because it's hard enough to manage the growth that we've had over the last several years. It would be that much harder if the data weren't accurate. And you have been spot on with our projections and where we're going to be in different areas, so that's really helped us immensely. The other question that I had is, clear back on page 8, but there are some students shown outside the district. I know there are some out in the unincorporated areas. What are the blue dots actually outside district boundaries represent? But how come they're included on this? Because sometimes the boundary stops and you can tell a neighborhood is cut, is
Almost every
split.
district I work for has a handful of students that are being tuitioned in.
Okay.
20, 30, I mean, it's a lot. In fact, I could probably kick you that.
Yeah, it's a very small amount. I just
Yeah, but
way out.
that every district has a few of those for one reason or another. Sometimes it's because of staff. Sometimes it's because of a special program you might have.
You might also have a
Especially-
split family.
Yeah.
come into play as well.
Split families, yeah, that's another.
Missouri City where.
It is.
Pretty minor in the scheme of things, but it's just something I noticed as I was flipping by.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
Some
Missouri
districts
City.
specialize in certain types of special education, you know, and so they'll kind of train students around to leverage those resources. But I'm not exactly sure the source of yours, but I could pull the students out and show them.
Yeah.
Are you seeing a shift away from home ownership to home rental?
The home rentals has definitely gone up. And again, that's just part of the healing process of households' financial issues. People are staying longer in rentals. And we're also seeing an uptick in a new kind of rental product for people who just cannot get a mortgage yet, whether it's some detached and much larger attached, like townhomes. But people are staying in longer. And again, one of those real life benchmarks that make younger couples or individuals make a different decision is children. We see higher end or bigger rentals for people that are moving down or a change in marital status, a single parent will move down into a rental for a longer period of time with kids. But in general, people are staying in them longer. The product isn't available, and the mortgage is still an issue.
Questions, comments?
Only other comment I would add is appreciate these gentlemen working so closely with the City of Liberty and City of Kansas City, as well as developers that we know are out there and their proposed developments. So they've really looked forward and kind of taken that into account. So in turn, sharing this information, the demographer study with the City of Liberty, with our developers, and that they were instrumental in helping us put that together. So, thank you.
We had tremendous cooperation this time around
Yeah.
from both of those communities, so that really does make a difference.